Hey foodies, my name is Margaret Debrah and I'm the founder of ETO. ETO is on a mission to put the global spotlight on African food and show the world what they have been missing. We are revolutionising the way people cook and appreciate African food whilst building community around our entire ecosystem.
All right. Welcome to Pan-African Perspectives, a weekly live stream where we talk to folks who are moving to the continent of Africa, building and investing in businesses on the continent. I'm Joe Hatagwa. I am a Sierra Leonean American who just spent the last 4 years living in West Africa. I talk about everything that has to do with moving to the continent of Africa. We talk to folks who are moving, visiting, investing. I'm killing time while I'm looking for everything I wanted to say. But today we're going to have a special guest, and I want to do this guest some justice. But before I do want to hear from you guys. Let us know where you're watching from and if you can hear us. While I'm waiting for you guys to tell us where you're watching from and if you can hear us, let me give you a little bit more about my background. So I launched Authentic African. The goal of the platform is to help people move, invest, and visit the continent of Africa. I do a little bit of explaining what my life was like living on the continent, going back and forth as I'm building a house, building a business, and doing all the things, living in both places, living in the West and living in West Africa. And I also share the stories of those who made the move, entrepreneurs who are living on the continent, and those who are also from the West and thinking about building businesses on the continent. So you'll hear some stories from other folks. You'll hear my story as well. And that's really what the purpose of the platform is. So if you guys can let us know on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching from, if you can hear us, and let us know where you're watching from. So give us a thumbs up if you can hear us, and then let us know where you're watching from. I'm going to move forward and just assume that you guys can hear me because people are shy today and not letting us know if they can hear us. But let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. So as you guys saw, we are going to be interviewing Margaret Debrah. She's the co-founder of ETO. ETO is a cross-platform media company offering African-influenced food products. She's been a part of Venture Crush FG 2024 in New York City. She's a chartered accountant, ex-Jefferies, ex-JP Morgan. She's an investment relations advisor. And, and so a little bit more about ETO. ETO is an AI-powered cross-platform media company offering African-influenced food experiences and products. It's co-founded by Margaret. She's an experienced leader with a background in financial services. As I mentioned, she worked at JP Morgan Chase. She's worked at Barclays as well. And I also mentioned that she worked at Jefferies. So ETO blends high-quality food content with cutting-edge technology to bring African-influenced food to the world. She's offering a dynamic community space featuring a diverse range of recipes, engaging cooking shows, and culturally rich content. The next phase of ETO will be to launch the ETO Premium, which is an AI-powered subscription marketplace that personalities, recipes, and recipes can connect users with curated African food products, catering to both African diaspora, Africans, and culinary enthusiasts worldwide. Let me say that as someone who has had a challenge with cooking, this is near and dear to me because I need to be able to source this kind of information, vegan-friendly, healthy West African foods. Before we bring our guest on, there's a few people who have joined us. So Kwame's here. What's up, Kwame? So you guys can hear us. Nice. Nice to see you. Let's see. Benjamin's here, watching from Ghana. Shout out to Benjamin. Kwame's here. Looking forward to the show. Watching from the UK. Our guest is from the UK. All right, cool. So let me bring Margaret on. So Margaret, how are you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on, Joe. I'm really good today, and I'm very excited to be on to talk to your community. And for those live on ETO's Instagram, hi again. You all know who I am. So really excited to be on.
Yes. Exciting time. So Margaret and I were introduced less than a week ago, right? It was very recent.
She's amazing, by the way.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I heard the same thing, of course, about you. So, Ya, or YOA, as you guys know her from the comments, she has always been an advocate for Africans Africans in the Diaspora. And she made the introduction on LinkedIn. She's like, you have to meet Margaret. Her story is amazing. What she's doing is awesome. And you're definitely going to want to share her with the audience. So I said, okay, immediately. When Ya says you should meet this person, you meet them. And so
I love it.
yeah, almost immediately. And yeah. Later. I just put my headphones in. Can you hear me? I hope there was no.
I can hear you. There was a bit of a delay, but I can hear you. You're still on. Oh, I can't hear you now though. Joe, I've lost you. Yeah, you're back. But you're on mute at the moment. It's mute.
Of course, I'm unmuted now. So apologies for the sound difficulties, guys, but you guys know how this is. Internet. Okay, so shout out to the Sound of Accra podcast is in the building. Have you guys met? Have you done this podcast?
No, I haven't yet, actually.
Okay,
so definitely need to.
You too. So yeah, that's so he's based in the UK. He has a studio in the UK and also in Accra as well. So you know, he usually goes to Accra every once in a while and does interviews there. He and I did one earlier this year, January of this year. I cannot believe it. And so we did one in Accra, but also he does it in the UK. So maybe next time you're in the UK, might want to stop by and meet with him. But a great podcast, lots of really exciting people on. And you know, it's great to highlight those who are living on the continent or going back and forth, specifically Ghana. Okay, cool. So that was a long introduction. We got a lot of that out of the way, but I'm noticing a lot of people are starting to join now, so that's good. We gave some time for people to come on board. So obviously we're going to talk about ETO, and I'm really excited to kind of share what you're doing and help people hear your story on ETO. But I do like to start from the beginning, right? For people to know like who you are and where you come from. So a little bit of background. Can you tell us about yourself? So like, where did you grow up? What's your family background? Are your parents Ghanaian? Tell us a little bit about your family background.
Yeah, so both of my parents are Ghanaian, Ashanti to be specific. So I was actually born in London in the UK. However, for those of you in the UK, especially specifically London, it's mini Accra within our Ghanaian community. So we frequently would travel back home. And growing up, you know, I enjoyed all of like, you know, Ghanaian flavors at home. It was, even though we were in London, it was like mini Accra. So yeah, I was born, I grew up, I went to uni in the UK. And then I started my professional career. So before ETO and venturing into entrepreneurship, I used to work in financial services. So I've spent probably the last 13 years working for banks in the UK. And now I'm doing ETO. So that's a bit about me. I'm one of four for my mum and dad. I'm one of six when you factor in all my dad's kids.
I get it. I understand. So talk to me about what did you study in college? So were you a finance major? Like what was your course of study when you went to school?
It's funny actually. I actually wanted to be a model, so that was like my vibe. I wanted to be a model, but you know, growing up in a Ghanaian household, specifically like having the dad that I had and mum as well, it was doctor, lawyer, or accountant.
Yep.
And I think when I was in college, I just remembered my accounting topics being quite difficult. So I thought, oh, this is interesting. Let me go down this route. So then when I went to uni, I studied finance and accounting, and then the rest was history. But I never kind of grew up thinking, oh, you know, I wanted to go into financial services, etc. It was more like, okay, qualified to become an accountant. And then once I'd done that, then opportunities opened up in finance. And then just because of like the industry, the package, etc., it was just, you know, it was just a great it was just great experience for me to learn, for me to understand what happens in financial markets. And I just spent like 15 years in that industry, and here I am today. So I would say it was family influence, and then opportunities just came about once I had kind of qualified as an accountant. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's always interesting to me with people who have lots of personality who work in accounting, because to me, or who at least studied accounting, to me, it's just all numbers. And I could not see myself looking at spreadsheets and looking at debits and credits and but obviously it led you to a career, and here we are at ETO. So I want to ask you about that. So, obviously you went into your career ex Jeffries, JP Morgan, all of the names that we know, the big banks. How did you get to this decision to think about moving to Ghana and to moving into this world of entrepreneurship and starting the company ETO?
Yeah, really good question. So I guess when I was in, I think actually when I was in Barclays, I remember like coming back to the floor and thinking to myself, oh my gosh, is this it? So is this it? Because I'd worked so hard to get here, and then I wasn't really satisfied with what was in front of me. And don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for the opportunity that God gave me, but I felt deep inside something was missing on my path, like in my journey. So I remember at the time, what happened? No, I remember at the time, so when you work for some of the big organizations, they give you days off to do community work. And I remember at the time, one of the girls had said to me, oh, like I had said, actually, you know what, let me go to Ghana. And then one of the girls that I was working with, she was like, yeah, go to Ghana. And then I thought, okay, let me go and, raise money within the bank, and the bank matched it. And then I went to donate to a charity called Hope Center. So it's an orphanage owned by Trinity Baptist Church. Okay. So I remember, I think that was like December 20, and I'm giving you a full breakdown here. So that was like December 2015.
Okay.
And I remember visiting the orphanage and thinking, oh my gosh. So initially, I remember there was a bit of a gap between the last time I'd gone to Ghana and now, or then, right? So I was thinking, I've raised this money, we're going to go and give it to the children, and, they need it, but when I got there, I was pleasantly surprised because they were happy, and I was the one kind of like coming in with the, just with work on my shoulders, etc. And then I remember looking at the kids and thinking, because I remember at the time as well, the media, even though I had been going to Ghana, the media always portrayed Africa as being like, this place that needs saving, etc. And it's just not a place for you to even think about going. So when I went, I realized that these kids don't need charity, they need opportunities. And I think from that experience, it kind of triggered something in me that I need to come back and like be operating in this space. But at that time, I didn't know what that would be. So I think a year after, I was flying into Ghana frequently after that trip. But then a year after, I remember I started doing research. And the reason why I was doing research, because I had said, okay, well, I can't really start my banking experience here, because at the time it was more retail banking that was operating in Ghana. You didn't really have an investment banking setup. Now you kind of do. There's a few firms that have emerged, but back then you didn't. So I was like, okay, I need to do something outside of finance. And the next big thing for me was food, because I'm just a foodie. I love food, and I could just see so much opportunity in the food space. So I conducted some research, which basically meant I went to visit farmers in like rural areas in Ghana. And I remember, so, the orphanage had made me think Africa doesn't need charity, it needs opportunities. And now doing my research, I was actually coming face to face with like farmers that were growing the crops that we like. So when you think about your yam, your plantain, etc. And at that time, I was still kind of figuring out what business model made sense for a person like me. So initially, I was going to do commodity trading, but then I realized I didn't have any relationships. And then I thought, I don't know, Apple came to mind, and I just remembered like, oh, look what Steve has been able to do with the iPhone. He's made it a global sensation, right? And then I was just like, okay, well, with food, African food is not just limited to Ghana. It's across all the countries in Africa. And at the same time, it's still underserved. So then after that trip, I just connected with my business partner and we were brainstorming ideas, and we ultimately fell on the idea that actually we just needed to make African food popular. And the way we could do that was by building a food network, getting people excited about African cuisines, and then at the same time empowering those people that either grow African crops or produce African food products. But the key thing about what we wanted to do at ETO is we felt that, like, in order to make anything look anything popular, it has to look good first. And what we found with African cuisine is that whilst it had the flavor, in terms of its representation online or like in magazines, it was really poor, right? I mean, we have some restaurants now popping up that do quality African cuisine, but back then you wasn't seeing that, right? So for us, we felt, okay, why don't we just build a network that ultimately leads with community? But the thing about ETO is you're discovering African food in a way you've never discovered it before. We then leverage technology to basically personalize it to the users, and ultimately it's just celebrating what, for me and you, we know to be amazing, but making it accessible to everyone. So yeah, so I guess my journey really, so if we go back, my journey first started where I realized, like, you know, Africa doesn't need charity, we just need opportunities. In London, I graduate, I can get a job. That should be kind of like the same thing you feel when you're in Accra, Kumasi, Lagos, wherever you are, right? And then after that, it was just a journey for me of discovering, okay, what industry could I go into first, and what could I build that could create significant impact? I mean, yes, we want to make profit here, but then at the same time, me and my business partner have always seen ETO as a venture that could empower stakeholders beyond us. And it just made sense to build a food network, because ultimately we just feel that it's really needed right now for discovering, for purchasing, cooking African flavors. So yeah, that's kind of how we got here. And yeah, it's been a journey, I must say. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a lot of sacrifice. I mean, sometimes I remember being in Barclays and even at Jeffries, I would literally like book a Friday and a Monday off, go to Heathrow, jump on a flight into Accra, then over the Saturday and Sunday I was doing my research, then Monday, you know, fly back, Tuesday back in the office. So it's required a lot of dedication. Sometimes I'm having to miss significant events, but I love it. I love the journey I'm on. And I think as an African, it's our responsibility to fix Africa. And I think I like to lead by the private sector because it's all I've ever known. But I feel like whether you're in the public or private sector, you need to find your community, you need to find your tribe, and you just need to start building. It's not easy because we've definitely struggled, especially this year with ETO, but it's worth it. And it's our responsibility, to be honest. So yeah, that's been my journey.
Okay. And so talk to us about the name ETO. So, I mean, obviously eat is in the name. How did you come up with the name ETO? What does it mean?
Yeah, so there's no meaning other than eat and O. Okay. And I just love the fact that different people say it in different ways, but you literally get like, okay, it has to be linked to food. So that was it. There's no other meaning behind ETO. But even as we've kind of like built the food network in its early days, the name people just love the name. So I'm just glad God gave us this name, because I think also that pushes us forward as well. It's like ETO, eat all. So yeah.
So, and you know, sometimes I'm hungry and I say, I guess we'll eat all. So I get it. It works. So in our local pidgin in Sierra Leone, which we call Creole. All right. So so you talked a little bit about, you know, working in the private sector and ensuring that folks in the private sector have jobs, right? You mentioned being in the UK, you graduate uni, you go into the private sector, there are jobs available. And so, you know, we talked a little bit about the platform, but I'd love to talk about like who are the constituencies on the platform, like who uses the platform, so people can get an idea of how you're impacting what it is that you just said. So who is it for? Like who is on either end? I see it as a marketplace, but talk me through like who's on either end of what I would consider this like as a marketplace.
Yeah, so from the consumer side, who are our consumers, right? So they're individuals, one, that can't cook. So for them, they
That's me.
So we have a lot of men actually that learn through us. So they can't cook African cuisine, and they just need like that first point, like that first source that can kind of guide them through the recipes. And then, you know, when we done our trials in London, also deliver meal kits to them. So that's one user profile. Then it's just foodies, so individuals that want to discover different flavors. What we've seen in our feasibility phase, which was our first trial and just on social media, is that we found individuals, let's just say you're Nigerian, for example, but you've never tried to cook East African cuisine, like Ugali, for instance. It's also nice to kind of like discover a platform that just doesn't specialize in one area. So as we grow ETO, you will find flavors from North Africa, South Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, all in the one space. So it really is about discovering. And then we also have like interracial couples, so a white woman dating maybe a Ghanaian man. She's never cooked African cuisine in her life. So again, the way we break things down for her, it helps her to kind of like, or him to understand the ingredients, and then also it's a very simplified way of cooking. I would like to say we're also a young brand, even though like a range of ages can use us. Like at ETO, we understand our customers don't have time. They don't have time to be in the kitchen like my mum was when I was young, or my aunties. So we're like quick to the point, create that authentic flavor, but I don't want to spend 3 hours. So as we put more recipes on our platform, you will find that a lot of what we offer are recipes that are broken down. So we don't want you in the kitchen for more than 2 hours, 2.5 hours, etc. We know you've got a busy schedule, and we're just trying to make African food easy for you. So that's like on one side, on the consumer. Now on the business side, and this is, so in the first phase of us, we've more tested with the consumer. And when we go to launch EATO Premium, by God's grace, that's where you're going to see more businesses come onto the platform. And these individuals range. So you have small, medium-sized businesses that either are manufacturing African food products. So let's just say, so for instance, we worked with, well, this brand is not necessarily, it's medium to large, Inverosh. So they're a gin brand based in South Africa. And we're seeing a lot of African drinks brands that are owned by Africans coming out of the UK, even though some of the manufacturing is being done in West Africa. And then in Ghana, on the continent, you're also having brands, whether it's dried fruits to dry snacks, to ready meals. So these brands, we want to position them on our platform. But what we're looking to do at ETO is basically visually display them in a way that it's appealing to obviously our consumers, and at the same time also puts them on par with international brands. Because I'm quite funny, like if you know me, my friends know me, if my friends are cheating, you know me, I like nice things and I like things to look beautiful. And for the most part, African cuisine hasn't looked beautiful and it hasn't looked nice. So what we really do at ETO is we bring in the best in terms of production and really make sure that on screen, the food, you just want to reach into the screen and grab that food. And by giving these smaller brands such kind of like production, etc., it will actually boost their sales, right? Because when you think about the consumer, if you think about even like, let's just say a McDonald's advert, there's a lot that goes into that food advert, but then it works because look at the success of McDonald's, right? And this is kind of what we want to do for like these smaller, small to medium sized brands up and coming on the continent. We just want to shine a spotlight on them so consumers can discover them and then start purchasing them. Because I think one thing that people forget is that we have these businesses that have gone out, secured funding, got the licenses to manufacture these food products, But if they don't sell, that's them done, right? So we really need the community to understand that as much as we're kind of like discovering these food brands, you need to go and support them by, I'm not saying buy something you don't like, but I'm saying try a product. And if you like it, continue to try a product, because they're doing a lot in terms of just making African food available to us. So we need to do our part and support them. And then we have farmers as well. The farmers on our platform is more just kind of like an education. It's not necessarily, especially in the next phase we're going to, it's not necessarily that you can buy directly from the farmers. But I think in telling our story and in celebrating African cuisine, we need to understand where it comes from, you know? And I remember when I was doing my research and, you know, visiting some of these rural farmers, I didn't realize that a lot of them are penny farmers, right? So when you're eating your agusi and your pounded jam, etc., you never ever think, okay, where did this pounded jam come from? But you've got a farmer called Kwame, let's just say, based in Tamale. He's basically farming this crop all year round or whenever the season is, and ultimately he can barely survive, right? So one thing we do want to do at ETO is there will be an impact area for us to kind of shine a spotlight and tell the stories of these farmers, and then find ways to basically give back to them. So yeah, so that's kind of like who's our initial stakeholders at the moment. Yeah.
Got it. So consumers on one side, somebody like myself or some other folks who want to learn how to cook. So for example, let's say you are Ghanaian and you want to try Nigerian jollof, for instance.
Yeah.
Or if you're a Nigerian, you want to try Ghanaian jollof. Or if you're either one of those two groups and you want to decide to try the best jollof, Sierra Leonean jollof, then you can do that as well, right? I like that idea. So on that topic, though, I do want to ask you a controversial question. I know that it's not exactly having to do with ETO, but as someone who's lived in the UK, there are plenty of Nigerian restaurants. I'm sure you've had some Nigerian friends. Where do you fall on the spectrum of who has the best jollof? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, Ghanaian jollof is the best. I mean, there's no debate, especially when we're competing with Nigerian. I'm not trying to offend anyone, but there's just no competition there. Like, honestly, there's no competition there. But I have heard Senegalese jollof, and I've recently visited Senegal, but I never tried the jollof. But I've heard that jollof could compete with Ghanaian jollof. But out of Ghanaian and Nigerian, Ghanaian, I mean, and people, you can vote in the comments who does the best jollof. It's definitely not going to be Nigeria.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, you would agree.
No, Nigerians are loud. They're the loudest, but they don't have the best jollof. We know that.
No, they don't.
We know that. I do hear, though, the further you go west, the better the jollof gets. But I do like Ghanaian jollof. I'm not going to say it's not good. It's just not as good as Sierra Leonean jollof. But that's my opinion. And, there are contests that say otherwise. Either Sierra Leone or Senegal wins, but nobody remembers that because the country Sierra Leone is known for anything besides blood diamonds. But we do make good jollof, and I represent it every day. I have to. Anyway, I just had to ask you that. I wanted to know. As you mentioned, as soon as you mentioned what some of the consumers could do, I thought to myself, I wonder what you might think about that. Okay, so you talked about the constituencies, right? You talked about eventually being able to help farmers. You talked about the small to medium-sized businesses being able to share their products on the site. You talked about people who want to learn how to cook, or somebody like myself who may not have the appetite for cooking, but maybe I could get a recipe and my house help can actually cook, which is the conversation that you and I had, right? Where I feel like that would probably be the use case for myself. So you have, you talked about the constituencies. What is the app, the core products of the app, right? So you kind of talked about who uses the app. But can we talk a little bit more about what the different the different use cases might be? So I just talked about one, but if you have some others, please.
Yeah, so I think let me correct you there on one thing. So we initially started off with social media.
Okay.
So social media was our first, sorry, give me 1 second. Social media was our first interaction with our community. And now we're basically fundraising to launch our app. So we haven't gone live with our app at the moment. But in terms of what the future of our app will look like is one, so for instance, on social media platforms, it's very general. If you wanted to, it would be difficult for you to search like our recipes on our Instagram. You would just kind of see what's been posted last, right? As your first point. So what we plan to do with the app is that whole personalization. So you as a user, for instance, if you're vegan or if you like meat, etc., can literally input your details, and then ultimately you would only see recipes that are tailored to your diet. We also know for the babes out there that like to track their calories, we're also going to introduce a calorie tracker. So ultimately, you'll be able to manage how much calories you're taking, and if you have a target for each month, you could track that there. In addition to this, again, as I mentioned, so part of our next phase will basically be to integrate the ability to shop with ETO partners, but that's going to be a very phased approach, because one thing we never want to do at ETO is kind of lose the quality of our service. And when you go into like food delivery, etc., it's a different ball game, a different beast. So what we plan to do, and it won't be available for every region, so let's just say globally, once we launch EATO Premium, that's what we're calling it, you would be able to find recipes no matter where you are in the world. You would be able to have that personalized experience no matter where you are in the world, calorie tracker, meal planning, etc. That's fine. But then for certain locations, we will start to switch on the ability to shop our partners, etc. So again, who's going to use our platform? It's literally going to be people that, one, love African cuisine, like to cook, or have a support system that can that cooks for them, and ultimately needs inspiration in the kitchen. So if you are an individual, and I feel like if you think about it, maybe a few years ago, and maybe for some of you still, you're recycling probably like 4 meals in a month.
Yep.
There's like, technology is so advanced now, you don't have to do that, and it's not even complicated to be inspired in the kitchen. Sometimes it's just about ingredients matching. So that's another thing our platform will be able to do. You tell us the ingredients you have in your kitchen, and then it will be able to come up with meals that with the ingredients you have, etc. So what we really want people to do is be excited about cooking and be excited about discovering African flavors. We are also going to launch a feature where we support restaurants, etc., African restaurants to be specific. So depending on where you are in the world, you'll be able to discover restaurants in your area. But then again, it's all about community, it's all about quality. So for us, it's as users come onto the platform, we expect them to give feedback. And if we get feedback that, you know, like a restaurant has poor service or it's got poor quality in terms of the food product, then we would take it serious and remove, replace, etc. So in us bringing African food to you, we also want there to be quality around the products, the service, etc. Because again, when we feel as Africans, and I've been an African on the continent and in the West as a diasporan, sometimes quality is missing around our food. And at ETO, it's not that we're about to, I wouldn't say we're about to be like the Michelin star of like African cuisine, but we definitely want to elevate African cuisine for our customers. And we also want to empower our partners to understand that it's about time you you improve your game when it comes to African cuisine. So yeah.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And so if you could compare this to another food app that's out there that people might be familiar with, what might it look like, but the version that is specific to African cuisine? What would something out there look like that looks like it?
Yes, I would say a hybrid between BuzzFeed Tasty and the US Food Network.
Okay.
I would say that, because the reason why I'm saying those two rather than saying like your Uber Eats, etc., is because we're not going into delivery. That's never going to be us. Our partners would deliver. But when you think about in us putting the global spotlight on African cuisine, we also want to have food shows. So it's not just limited to the recipes. We will have cooking shows. So ETO Taste Your Dates is an example where three men cooked for a lady, and then ultimately she basically, the dish she liked the most, that was the individual she went on a date with. So we want to make it fun and exciting. So that's similar to your US Food Network. And then on the BuzzFeed Tasty side of things, if you've ever seen BuzzFeed Tasty, you go on, you see chefs, but not necessarily just African chefs from across the world. But on our platform, we are literally focused on African first. So we want to empower African chefs on the continent, and then you have some amazing chefs off the continent. So yeah, that's kind of like what you should be thinking when you're thinking ETO. Literally a food network. It's not complicated. It's literally a food network.
Food network. Got it. Love it. So this is YOA. She said the link up the world needed, and then of course two amazing people doing amazing things. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, of course, always supporting. So appreciate you. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the, kind of what, the use cases, who's on the platform, who's expected to be on the platform, what kind of led you to this point. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit to some general business questions about being on the continent, doing business on the continent, and what that could be like, because there are many people who watch, and, depending on where you are on the political spectrum, there's recently an election, and during these presidential election times, there are generally mass exoduses, I guess, to the continent. And through that, people are looking to start businesses, they're looking to invest in businesses, and they have a lot of questions. And there's no better person to ask than someone who's recently done it. So my first question is just a very basic question. What are some of the challenges that you've had doing the surveys, starting the business, raising money, all of that in Ghana in particular? I know you back and forth between the UK and Ghana, but in Ghana, what have some of those challenges look like?
So I feel like one of the first challenges is, I think when you're a female founder, I definitely feel you're treated differently to your male counterparts. And what I mean by that is, building ETO, for example, it requires a lot of capital. It's not something that can be bootstrapped forever, because the working capital alone is going to kill you. So that has basically meant I've needed to, put myself out there, network, and ultimately raise money, whether it's in Ghana or anywhere in the world, to be frank. But when you're dealing with individuals, investors in Africa, especially male investors, I don't necessarily think they take women seriously in business. And this is not to talk about everyone, but generally I feel like Africa's kind of, and this is me speaking about Ghana, West Africa, well, mainly Ghana, to be honest. I feel like women in business is, you can have a small business, and that's okay. But to we look at ETO and we're trying to build a high growth food tech company here, right? So some of the numbers can be shocking to individuals in terms of our future projections, etc. And you're just not taken serious. It's like, okay, let's meet for a drink, let's meet for lunch. And then that lunch turns into a date. And it's just like, no, I need money. I don't need a man, right? So that's probably one of the challenges. So I would say any females looking to come and raise money here, be prepared for that. How I've navigated it. Well, one, I just, when it comes to meetings, I never meet anyone after 6 p.m. Right? I tend to meet in the daytime in a public space, definitely not meeting at anyone's house, etc. So that sets kind of like the right tone. And then if someone's being inappropriate, I just kind of cut that relationship. But I would say for the women out there that are looking to come to Africa and do business, just be prepared for that. If you want the luxuries of dealing sometimes with African men in terms of them showering you with gifts, etc., you'll get that here. But then when it comes to business, it's a different kind of ball game. Another challenge I found in Ghana is that sometimes you do have a good pool of talent here, but it's very limited, right? So therefore, accessing the right talent at the different phases of your business, sometimes you will have to look outside. So be prepared for that. There is some behavioral differences. So again, I'm Ghanaian, but I did grow up in London, so I'm used to kind of like the UK working culture. Then I went into investment banking, which the working culture is very intense, especially when you're working for some like the big US banks like JP Morgan. In Ghana, I just don't know if people like to work here. I mean, most work days kind of finish around 3 p.m., 4 p.m. That's something I'm not used to, because again, when you're working in banking, you could be in the office until 1 a.m. the next day and still be expected to show up, you know, at like 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. that same day. So that's another thing that's a bit different here. People kind of work to their own time. And it can get a bit frustrating, especially when you have deadlines. So when you're doing business in Ghana, one of the things you will hear, oh my gosh, it's so frustrating. I'm even getting emotional. You will ask someone, when will they complete a task? And they will say, soon, it's coming. But you ask them to define, so what does that mean? Like, what's the ETA on this, right? And you will never get a specific time. It's always like it's coming. So I would always say, when you're giving yourself a deadline on a project, extend it by 2 weeks or a month. Otherwise, you're always going to miss your deadlines. And I think that's just the culture in Ghana. In Nigeria, I hear it's the opposite. I hear, you know, they're more on time, etc. But for Ghana specifically, you just have to be mindful of that. Otherwise, you'll be crying all the time if you're going by Ghanaian time.
GMT, Ghana Man Time.
Say it again.
GMT, Ghana Man Time. That was the first thing I was told when I arrived in Accra. They said we operate on GMT. I had a meeting with someone who came about 45 minutes late, and she was like, GMT, Ghana Man Time.
Yes.
I said, oh, okay, got it.
And that's just the way it is here. I don't think. Sorry, I'm just charging my thing. I don't think it's ever going to change. So just be mindful of that. Other challenges, obviously, you know, the political landscape. It depends on what businesses you're in, but at any point, like it also depends on the structure of your company. If your bank set up here, transactions are coming here, people can see, right? So you just have to be mindful that you might have individuals knocking on your door that you weren't expecting to knock on your door. Then if you're into logistics, we all know infrastructure is poor in Africa, right? So again, there's that to manage. I think, to be honest, you know, I have my experience, even though I've been managing. I think for anyone trying to do business here, one, I would say, you need to be coming over, you need to be doing the research. You also need to, I guess it's good to connect with people here that are already in business. And just understanding that, like, it's not easy, it's not straightforward. And to be fair, you could lose a lot of money even before anything gets started. So you and yourself, make sure you have enough resources to fund whatever project you're building, because it's a very challenging landscape. And when I compare like Ghana, for instance, to the UK, there's not much support. You know, I mean, you have all these initiatives, come back, build, etc. Do the research on like just setting up a business, right? Like the fees and just setting up the entity, etc. Dealing with lawyers here compared to the UK. I mean, the UK has a friendly business environment. I don't think it has a great fundraising environment, but you can set up a business for like £10, a company for £10, and then you're up and running. You can find accountants easily, etc. But Ghana, it's a bit different. So I think, again, you just have to do your due diligence, have a good budget, and come over and see for yourself. Yeah,
that was all helpful. I mean, you know, I heard three main my brain is not working today. I heard so basically I heard three main areas, right? One was as a woman doing business in Africa, which you every time I ask that question to a woman entrepreneur, I hear very similar things. lunch meetings turn into lunch dates, right? And having to set boundaries, and you already gave advice about what to do, right? Meeting in a public place, daytime, never meeting at a house, etc. Those are all very, very, very important things. You mentioned the time, which I worked at Jumia for a year, as I mentioned to you previously. So that was a struggle, to say the very least. But it's not exclusive to Sierra Leone. Let me say, not exclusive to Ghana. Sierra Leone has the same challenges, and other parts of the continent are also very similar. I have heard what you've heard about Nigeria, and I've worked with some Nigerians. I think it depends on who you're dealing with. I think where you'll find similarities across the board is if you're looking at like line level workers. Folks who are lower skilled employees, they tend to be the ones who are the most egregious, being the latest. Generally, the higher you move up in terms of higher skills and things like that, they tend to be a little bit better. But I've heard Africa man time, Salon man time, Ghana man time. I've heard it across all the different countries that I've lived in and I've worked in. So it is not exclusive to Ghana. And also Nigerians vary across the spectrum. Some are on it and on time, and some aren't. So just for those listening who would think that okay, well, I'll just go do business there, just be prepared that happens kind of everywhere on the continent. And then the other thing that I heard you say lastly was the business environment. I think, as you touched on that, I think that's super important, because I think that all of us are, who are coming from the West, we're used to a way of doing things, right? And if you've ever opened up a business, got in the US an EIN number, things like that, even if you found that difficult, which it's not compared to to starting a business on the continent, even if you found that difficult, be prepared for it to be 10 times harder, right? Understanding what you have to do in terms of taxes, what documents you need, how you have to stay up to date yearly, all the different things. For me, I get emails from New York State Department of Labor that tells me every year, or California would tell me every so often, I need to renew these things. Don't expect to get those from the government of Ghana or Sierra Leone or any of these other places, right? You need to just be up to date and know what things you need to do, right? Those things are super important. So I'm glad you said those things. You also gave some advice along the way. Is there any other high-level advice you would give to people planning to move to Ghana outside of starting a business, but people moving or starting a business? Any advice you want to give to people?
I think if you're going to move anywhere, just make sure you know where your source of income's come in, right? Because again, one of the challenges in Ghana compared to the UK is that, like, the UK is built on a credit system as well, similar to the US. You can just get credit for anything, whereas in Ghana it's like, bring your cash to get your car. Like, there's no where you go. You could try and get a bank loan, but the interest rates on them are ridiculous. So why would you even do that? So it's just making sure you have the resources. And then, for instance, if your car breaks down, or like healthcare, you just need to understand that it's a different environment. And sometimes I would say it could be a bit more expensive here than there to put all these things in place. So you just need to do your research and really understand your budget, so you don't come here and get burnt. But for the most part, though, I feel like once you figured it all out, Ghana is amazing. It's just, you just need to be aware of these things, and because, for instance, if the lights go out and you don't live in a place with a generator, that means you have no light. So you'll need a place with a generator, right? So, but then it's costly to have the generator running when the lights don't go out. And then, like, this is election year, for instance. So we've seen a lot of lights off situations in just 1 year. So again, just factor in these unexpected costs that will come up. Yeah.
Great point. Cash is king.
It really is.
That was a lesson that I learned moving to the continent, for sure. And yeah, I'll second that. I'll second what you said about Ghana is amazing. I loved living in Accra. Although I'm not Ghanaian, I don't speak Tree, I really did enjoy my time in Accra. Yeah, I'm willing to learn, Medasi. I got a few. But that's a very few. But I will be back in December. So I will be back to enjoy I would just say end of year celebrations. That's what I call it.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to call it. I'm not going to give it the other name they give it. I'm going to have the end of year celebrations in Ghana. So I'll be there.
I love it.
So we talked about some of the challenges. We talked about your advice. What I didn't ask you is, what are some of the highlights that you've had, you know, moving to Ghana, being there full time, and or being there most of your time, and starting this business? What are some of the highlights that you've seen being an entrepreneur on the continent?
Sorry, give me a second. Yeah, so a really good question. So I think for me, like really one of the main things was like discovering who I am, and like being, I don't know how to describe it, but I remember, so this is a good example. So when I growing up in the UK, for the most part, like that my early years, I was around a lot of people that looked like me, right? Then I go into investment banking and I'm like the 0.002%, right? And then you go into a world where people don't look like you, they come from different backgrounds. It's just a lot. So you kind of you lose your identity, basically. So I remember when I first started coming back to Ghana as an adult, it was just such a breath of fresh air, even though I had been growing up in Mini Accra, etc. But honestly, once I started corporate, yeah, it was a lot. So I just basically, I remember coming back and I was like, oh my gosh, this feels amazing. Just seeing Black people, it's like the little things, just seeing Black people, you know, meeting young professionals, so people similar to me, but maybe just working in different places, and everyone just coming to this one city and just being able to mingle amongst them. I can't describe, like I'm looking for a specific word, but I just found myself as a person. I found myself as a woman. I was no more kind of like apologetic as to who I was, right? Like, so for instance, in banking, sometimes it's like, oh, sorry, or pardon, or excuse me, No, that all went out of the window. I really gained my confidence. So I remember going back and I was literally a different girl in the office, you know, even if I was eating something different to you, and so what? This is my flavors, this is my food, I love it. You know, it was nice to go back and confidently say, yep, I spent Christmas in Accra at my friend's beach club, and yes, we have beach clubs, you know, we're not all living in huts. So I think that was probably one of the main things. So I knew who I was as a person. And I think for your audience in the US, especially your audience that don't have that initial direct connection, I definitely, and haven't been to Africa, I definitely would recommend coming back just to basically, it's a feeling you get, and you have to come, and then you will understand what I'm trying to communicate. But you really discover who you are, and you really feel like, okay, this is the one place in the world where I belong. As a Black woman, as a Black man, I belong in Africa. And it's just, it's such an amazing experience. So that's one benefit for me of coming back and coming back frequently. Another thing is, as I've always said, like, as I said in the beginning, I'm just really pro-Africa, right? And I think, you know, it's one thing to say you're going to do something, but then to actually, like, I was earning a lot of money in the UK, right? So to actually leave that behind, take a risk and be here and be part of kind of like this movement has just been amazing. And I always win in life, but it could be a different venture, but ultimately it's just, I'm glad I took this risk. I'm 100% glad I took this risk. So then, and what other things would I say? And then it's just meeting like-minded people. So again, some of like my closest friends now are individuals I met actually in Accra, right? And that's the beauty sometimes about traveling. You meet people in different locations, and then they also become like family, like your lifelong friends. What other benefits would I say? I think for the most part, those are like my main highlights. Oh, okay. and the food.
Oh yeah.
Especially here in Ghana, I feel like we have some of the best flavors. I would say for the most part, maybe more outside of Accra, because Accra's now, there's just an influx of like international brands that have mixed up like the food scene here. But the food in Ghana is amazing. The fufu, the soups, it's just amazing. And what other benefits? I think that's it for now, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you named a few, a bunch actually. So, you know, I agree with you on all of those things, and the food is a big thing.
Yeah.
You know, food that is recently out of the soil. You know, I like to say, you know, I gained. I know you're in the UK, so you probably do kilos. I gained like 8 kilos in 1 month moving back to the States, right? Like, and that was a problem, you know. And you know, for most people, people are like, where? I mean, I wasn't a big person to begin with, so yes, but I didn't want to gain those 8 kilos. Okay, just to be clear, it was not a goal of mine. But yeah, it happens all the time. Every time I go, I lose some weight. Every time I come back, I gain. So, and the food is so much cleaner. I feel like more clear-headed. I wake up earlier. I feel so much better eating the food locally, whatever country, whether Sierra Leone or Ghana. I feel the same way. So I'm with you on that.
Sorry to cut you off, but I do feel the food in the States is horrible for the most part. A lot of it tastes fake, you know. And I grew up in the UK. The food in the UK, there's so many rules around what can be brought in, etc. But I just feel like what they're serving you in the US is actually killing you. And I think that's even more of a need for people to discover African flavors, because our food is actually quite healthy, especially when you think of the superfoods such as your fonio, etc. Honestly, it's life-changing. And there's definitely a need for like that American diet to be changed, because it's just not healthy. It's disgusting, if I'm being honest. Yeah.
Well put. Agreed. 100%. You know, that's why I went vegan, right? So, so I'm with you. So let's talk about how we can support ETO, right? How can those watching at home or wherever you're watching from, support ETO? So I have some notes here. I was planning to just read it, or do you want to say it off the top of your head?
I'll say it. Yeah.
Okay. You say it. Yes.
So as I mentioned, there's many ways. So first, definitely be following us. I think the best handle to follow us is our Instagram, because that's where we post most frequently. But you can also follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. So the links will be below after this. And then at the same time, so at the moment, guys, it's been a very challenging year for ETO, and a lot of that has to do with the climate we're in, and with it being the US elections, markets had kind of slowed down in terms of activities around fundraising. So we are doing, as it stands, we're still fundraising, and we're fundraising one to open a media studio in Accra, Ghana. So we are inviting our community to either enter a competition where you buy a ticket to potentially win a holiday to Ghana, and that ticket's just $6, or you can pledge. So that's $6 for one ticket, or you can pledge any amount between £100 to £500, and each pound gives you one entry into our competition. But that pledge goes towards us opening a media studio. And then for anyone that actually really, really likes what we're doing at ETO, so go for our Instagram. I can also send you a link to our product demo. We are looking for angel investors. And at the moment, we've had angel investors. We have actually had only Black people angel invest in ETO, and they have been Africans as well. So it kind of just shows the importance of a community in helping something like this to even start in the first place. So we are inviting angel investors to come in. The minimum check size is 2,500. I'm conscious of how much I can say on here, and ultimately it's on a 1.2 million valuation. So again, if you're interested in angel investing, I think the best thing you can do is probably reach out to me at Margaret, Margaret at mseato.com, and I'll send you all our investment decks and information. And then outside of that, if you went to our link Instagram page, you in the bio, you get the links for our extended crowdfund, and you can support us that way. But ultimately, we need more people sharing, more people discovering, because again, you know, as Joe mentioned, ETO is currently on an accelerator in New York City. And whilst we're amongst some amazing companies and being one of the few Black founders on that program, it's the Black founders that are the ones that are struggling to raise funds, whereas the white-owned companies have all raised in the millions. So we're definitely feeling it in terms of, like, even in the startup ecosystem, you know, Black founders continually are still being underfunded, are being asked to create miracles. And yeah, we definitely need the communities to support. And in return, I mean, it's not like you're supporting a product that doesn't make sense to you. If you love African food, or if you know someone that loves African food, or for instance, your mom, your dad, etc., then ETO will definitely be a platform for them as we continue to grow, etc. So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, everybody's always asking, like, what should we invest in? How can we do more? So that is your answer right there. I think Margaret did a great job of explaining it. So shout out to Officially Joy, says she loves the conversation. So Anna, it's been a while, aspiring, well done, love it. Yeah, and you know, we need to do more to support ourselves, you know, like regardless, like I said, it's an election year in America, it's an election year in Ghana. Regardless of who you support, the one thing we can do is we can decide where we put our money, right? So you can be upset or happy about whatever happened in the presidential elections, but you know, if you want to have more control over what's happening in your direct day-to-day lives, I think it should be it's important that we start to look at how we can diversify our income and our assets by looking at different ways to work on our own personal finance. So that's what I'll say about that. I don't want to get too deep into that because you know, this is not the place for that. But sorry, say that again.
We could do another session.
Yes, we could do another session. That's a whole nother conversation. I got in trouble the other day, and it's a conversation anyway for another time. But I do want to ask you, are there any final words that you want to say to folks? I mean, you've said a lot. You've let people know how they can find you. Any other final words before we go? And of course, we just had like a bunch of people join. If you're just joining, go back and watch from the beginning. But you know, for those of you who've been here since the beginning, any final words for the group?
Yeah, no, I think, you know, for the most part, I feel like if people coming onto your platform, obviously their interest is in Africa. And I think especially for those in the diaspora, you know, Africa is home to all of us. You know, do continue to take the time to learn, understand, connect with people on the continent. I think you guys have seen what's happened in the US, right? And I know for the next 4 years, it's definitely going to be interesting times, but there is a place in the world where you belong. The only problem with this place is that it's in the build phase, right? So it being in the build phase, you know, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be difficulties, but again, there's people like myself and Joe who are actively, you know, taking the steps to connect the dots. And so, you know, just do what you need to do to come back, because I would say Africa does need you. And even if in your situation you can't, it's like, how can I support what Joe's doing? How can I support what Margaret's doing? You know, and again, if you can't purchase a ticket, do you know someone that would be interested? Could you share the platform? Because the only way authentic African grows is by you guys tuning in, but then at the same time there's a resource element. It needs to be funded, so it's being able to support Joe. And then kind of similar to me at ETO, it's like the only way we can continue to grow this into kind of like a beast is if we get the right support. And on our journeys, we're not always going to get it right, but it's having the grace to kind of understand where we are and like the sacrifices we've made. So yeah, that's kind of like all I wanted to say. And then outside of that, because I think that was a bit too deep, for the individuals that don't know how to cook, you need to come to ETO, because everyone should know how to cook basic foods. And then if you just love food and want to discover you know, new recipes, etc., ETO is where it's happening. Yeah. And also one last thing that I wanted to add, we are looking for individuals in sales and marketing. So if you excel in these two areas, those are kind of jobs that don't necessarily have to sit on the continent for us. So please do reach out and like share your experience, because again, you know, we are growing and I am looking for the right talent to grow the platform. So that's all from me. Yeah.
Awesome. And one of the things you said there is Africa needs you. And I would say to everybody watching, you need Africa, because I really will say, and you mentioned it, it's hard to express what you feel when you're on the continent. That's why so many people make the decision to move. Like when I went to Ghana for the first time in 2019, after being in Sierra Leone a number of different times over the previous couple of years, it was 12 months before I moved to Accra, right? So I would definitely say that it's hard to express what it feels like to have African excellence. You know how they say representation matters. What you find when you're living on the continent is you find people who look like you and are from where you're from, across all areas in business, politics, whatever sector it is that you're looking at, in the healthcare sector, everywhere. And people see you as you, not as a part of that group, right? So, you know, I think that that's hugely important. So I just wanted to second that notion, because I think that is a really important point that you made. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for doing this. I think we're gonna, if you want to stay on for a second, Margaret, we can stay on after the live stream's over and chat a little bit more. But I will leave everybody with the video. I think it was the investment video, right? I can play that, right? To go out. Yeah. Okay, so I'll leave everybody with that video. It's a reminder. And then on the replay, go to YouTube and look in the description to find the links to all of the pages that we looked at previously and everything that you need to support the platform. So with that, guys, I want to say thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys all on the next video.
Have a good week, guys. Bye.